Hello, Professor. My name is Sister Madeline, and here I am sharing with you my ideology of how I come to understand race and ethnicities by now. So for me, being alive as a human person, it means so much more than just um, the components of race and ethnicities that are imprinted within myself. So for me, even though race are socially constructed, and that means it's not objectively accurate, or another way, it's not scientifically nor biologically accurate in categorizing people in different groups. Um, yet at the same time, there are reasons why we are still having that concept of race in our society. And the very first thing that I think of and I have heard of is due to health services. Um, so race is pretty much, I would say, it's a measuring of one's geographic origin. And with that, it does help give or tell a lot of risk indicators of the health outcome later in that person's life. This is when race is very helpful because it does have that common good purposes serving our humanity. And yet when it has to do with social inequality or social ladder, social status, based on political subjectivity, I think it's very unnecessary and it's very biased. It's not necessary in determining how people are treated in social status based on race. However, it is very helpful if we can use race in the correct way, in the correct context. And an example I can give is that I come from an Asian background. So normally people would ask me or call me that I belong to Asian race. And I have no problem with it. I have no trouble. And I agree with it because my family did come from Asian countries. And what they concern about in my race when it's being used for good common purpose is that those who come from Asia, they tend to develop sickle cell anemia due to that protective adaptation against malaria. And they felt that responsibility to keep track on our blood count over time to make sure that we are healthy. And for me, I appreciate that very much because I do have anemia and my entire family does have it. And so for me, that's a very healthy thing to consider race. So for me, just to consider race as being Asian, and people might say, hey, Asian is lower than white or any other race. I would disagree with that because we're not anywhere low in our social status, financially speaking. And so in health services purpose or any common good purposes, the necessity to know which race I come from is very helpful and reasonable. But when it comes to social status or social equality or social opportunity, it's totally subjective with bias just to have people be put into certain social categories. And going on to ethnicity, I would say focuses on more on my ancestral genes, which determines what kind of components I have in my bloodline. It's the biological makeups which contributes into my outward experience, which is my nose, how my eyes look like, how my hair looks like, how my skin looks like. However, ethnicities does not solely based on an external look alone of a person. So from my understanding, I think the intention of having ethnicity is to know the inheritance that will pass down from the parents to the later generation. It does not affect only at the biological levels, but it also affects cultural level. And culture, it can be understood as the environment of which I grew up with, along with its customs, its celebrations, and the core value of which I hold on to even into my adulthood. And culture can have its various form. It doesn't have to be fixated on food alone or on dress code or on celebration. It could be a family culture. Of one family can have different culture from the other family. That being passed down from, certain ethnical background, or it could be simply a shared value or beliefs of certain group of people, like religion, or even the school, they do have their own school culture. And so for me, I'm Vietnamese, and so I am from a Vietnamese culture. I uphold my celebrations that my parents celebrate. I hold on to the values that being passed down from my grandparents. At the same time, I grew up in America, in the US. And so I also simultaneously celebrate my American culture. I also have my Catholic culture because that's where my religion is from. So I go to church, I say my prayers, and as a religious sister, I have my communal culture. I pray in a certain way, I go do certain ministries, and upon that, when I go out to teach, I also have my school culture. And so who am I then? Well, I am Vietnamese, that's my ethnicity. Other might put me into Asian for my race, that is fine. And I do uphold Vietnamese celebration like Lunar New Year, Mid-Autumn Festival. You have a core value where we really hold on to that family collectiveness. Family is something very dear to my heart. And a certain virtues like perseverance, diligence, honesty, integrity are the characteristic that we always uphold in our hearts. And with my culture as a Catholic, I do keep celebration of Christmas, Easter, and many other seasonal liturgical calendar of the church. And so for me, I am Vietnamese, I am Asian American, but that is not all that I am. That is within me. It can also influence how I act, how I respond, but what I do with my identity, what I interpret from my identity, it matters as much as how race and ethnicity affects me. I could be Vietnamese, yes, but I could turn out either being a bad Vietnamese American or good Vietnamese American based on how I behave or conduct myself in my profession. And how does that function in my daily life? I mean, it gives me a sense of purpose and direction every morning. Every morning, to begin with, is my Catholic culture. I do my morning prayer, I go to Mass, and I head out to my school ministry. And when I come to school, I start to blend in with my school culture. And then it just goes on and on. It gives me a sense of fulfillment of what I'm doing and how I'm doing things in my day. And that is how race and ethnicity play their roles in my life. I hope this video can capture well enough what I understood about race and ethnicity. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you for your feedback. Thank you, Professor.